Okay, here we go. Let's start off with the LA Angels, and with Shohei Ohtani going to the other side of LA to go play for the Dodgers, all the focus is back on Mike Trout for this spring. And Mike Trout, unfortunately, has been hit with the injury bug a lot over the last few years. You got to go back to 2019 to see the most games that he's played in a single season since then at 134. But after that, hasn't really come close to playing in a full season. Played 119 in 2022, but still, he's got to figure out a way to stay on the field. Last year, even over the 82 games that he did play, not very Mike Troutish kind of numbers. A good WRC plus of 134, but not the numbers that we're used to seeing. So all eyeballs are going to be on Mike Trout this spring training. How healthy is he going to look? What kind of shape is he going to be in? So let's keep an eye on Mike Trout, and if we can get a full season out of him, that is only going to be good for baseball and good for the Angels. Moving on to the Houston Astros, and every spring, there's not really a whole lot to pay attention to because, well, the Astros are just good every single year. They've been to the ALCS for 7 straight seasons now. So with the Astros, there's not really anything too much eventful going on every single spring. But this spring, they have a new closer in the fold, and that is Josh Hader. The back end of this bullpen is looking nasty with Hader, Presley, and Abreu. Are you kidding me? And imagine if they get Rafael Montero back on track to what he was doing a couple of years ago. I mean, my goodness, this bullpen is absolutely nasty. So my focus for the Astros is the back end of this bullpen. How are they going to perform this spring? Times are not very fun for Oakland A's fans right now. They're going to be going to Las Vegas in a few years, and people don't even know where they're even going to be playing in 2025, considering the lease of the Coliseum is up at the end of 2024. So that's going to be interesting. But for this spring, I'm going to be focusing on the young guys in camp. Guys like Zach Geloff, I think he's going to be a really solid player. Remember Shea Langeliers? They got him back in the Matt Olson trade a couple of years ago. So let's see if he can take more of a step forward. Guys like Esteury Ruiz, a lot of speed with him. Even someone like JJ Bleday there. And then on the pitching side of things, you got guys like Mason Miller, Luis Medina. So there is some young talent here in Oakland. I know it's not the most fun of times, but hey, let's pay attention. Let's see what these young guys do in camp. For the Toronto Blue Jays, I actually reached out to the guys at Blue Jays today to get their thoughts on what they think the top storyline for their spring training is. So let's go talk to those guys.
Everybody's going to be talking about Alek Manoah being the big focal point for the Jays this spring training, which is true, right? The kid is obviously under a microscope, but honestly, and maybe this is a generic answer, it's gotta be Guerrero. I am looking at Guerrero, and I'm looking at what he can do with the fastball. He's had one of the best off seasons in his entire career. The kid looks to be in great shape. If Vladimir Guerrero Jr. can catch the fastball and turn on it, good luck, American League East.
The Blue Jays are in a wonderful place right now where you really don't have to worry about the pitching. They have the rotation, they have the bullpen, and they even added depth this offseason. And they have guys coming through their minor leagues that are supposed to support that staff. Now, the thing that I'm looking for as a Blue Jays fan is, well, who's going to be supporting that lineup? Right after Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, George Springer, and now newly acquired Blue Jay Justin Turner, what do they have after that that's going to really be supporting and threatening other teams' pitching staffs? I'm looking for guys in this Blue Jays minor league system that are going to break out in an unexpected way. Look for players like Alan Rodin and Damiano Palmagiani. Those are guys that we've been looking at that are pretty underrated. I think if those guys could step up mid-season, it might be good for the Toronto Blue Jays down the stretch.
And thanks to the guys over at Blue Jays today. They do some awesome Blue Jays content. Make sure you go follow their channel. But I agree. They didn't have one guy last year have over a 500 slugging, and that included guys like Vlad Jr., George Springer, even Bo Bichette, who did have a pretty good year. But they need some more oomph in that lineup. Can some of these guys step up for them? Justin Turner, I think that's a good addition. He had a solid season for the Red Sox last year, but he's approaching 40 years old. So I'm looking for some of these other guys to step up a bit. Vlad Jr. had himself a very good offseason. Looks like he's in great shape. So let's see if he can get back to more of those 2021 numbers, and George Springer as well. Let's see what he can do. Dalton Varsho, let's see if he can get a bit more out of that bat as well. And like they mentioned, maybe some of these guys down in the minor leagues can come up and give some impact. And sure, people are going to be paying attention to this rotation with Alek Manoah. He's always a hot button topic. Was great a couple of years ago. Terrible season last year. So let's see. He looks like he's in better shape. So let's see if he can get back to what he was doing prior. But this rotation overall is looking solid. I am looking for more out of this lineup, though. Moving on to the Atlanta Braves, and I know they got knocked out by the Phillies last postseason, even though they were heavily favored, but this team is still one of the best in baseball. There are so many good players to pay attention to on this team for this spring, but I'm going to be focusing on the health of the starting rotation. Max Fried was excellent when he pitched last year, but he did miss a lot of time last year. Charlie Morton, he missed time towards the end of the season last year and into the postseason. He's 40 years old, so let's see, what he's looking like this spring. And hey, old friend Chris Sale going to the Braves in a trade with the Red Sox this offseason. Vaughn Grissom going to the Red Sox. But Chris Sale, he's missed a lot of time over the last few years. So let's see if he can finally, put it all together here for the Braves. A lot of pressure taken off of his shoulders here, projected to be the 3 or the 4 in this rotation. I think that's a good spot for him. But this Braves team, so many fun players to watch. But I will be paying attention to the health of this rotation. And real quick, just want to mention Spencer Strider. He did add a curveball into his mix this spring, so the fact that he already had a dominant fastball and a slider, and now he's going to complement that with a curveball, I mean, the sky is the limit for this guy. Going to be very fun to watch this spring. Moving on to the Milwaukee Brewers, and they got a bit of a facelift this past offseason, trading away their ace in Corbin Burnes to the Orioles, getting a couple of younger pieces back in Joey Ortiz as well as DL Hall. But the guy that I'm going to be paying attention to this spring for the Brewers is Jackson Chourio, the number 2 prospect in Major League Baseball. There is a lot to like with Jackson Chourio, and I think the Brewers think the same thing, considering they just gave him a huge extension, and he hasn't even played a sniff of Major League Baseball at this point. Like I said, number 2 prospect in baseball at this point, but the sky is the limit for this guy. A 5-tool player, excellent bat-to-ball skills, a vicious swing, makes great contact. He can hit for power. He's very fast out there in the field. He can definitely do a lot of damage on the bases as well. A lot to like with Jackson Chourio. The only thing that we're going to pay attention to is just his approach at the plate. There was a bit of swing and miss in his game last year, a bit of chase in his game, a bit of whiff in his game. So let's pay attention to that this spring. Let's see if he gets that cleaned up, because man, if he does and he puts it all together this spring especially, I mean, my goodness, we could see a special season from him this coming year. And we all saw it last year with Corbin Carroll. Very excited to see what Chourio does this spring and this season. Let's stay in the NL Central and talk about the St. Louis Cardinals. A very disappointing season for them last year, and a big reason for that was the starting rotation. However, they added a few guys this offseason. Sonny Gray, he was awesome last year, and a couple of innings eaters in Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn. Don't forget, they're going to be getting Steven Matz back this coming year. He did miss a lot of time last year, so let's see what he looks like. But I'm paying attention to this rotation this spring. I'm going to be looking at, how is Sonny Gray doing? How is Kyle Gibson looking? Lance Lynn, a bit of a down year for him last year. How is he going to be looking? And Steven Matz, what's his health going to be looking like for this spring? If this rotation is stabilized and they all have a good spring, that could definitely translate into the regular season, and that can set the Cardinals up for a bounce back season in 2024. And once again, staying in the NL Central, let's talk about the Chicago Cubs. And what I'm going to be paying attention to with the Cubs is simply the Chicago Cubs as a team now that they have a new manager in Craig Counsell. I'm very intrigued to see, what he does with different parts of this team. Christopher Morel, he's been getting reps at third base. Is that where he's going to see most of his playing time? What do you do with Nick Madrigal? What goes on there? Are there any more, possible free agent additions to be made with the Chicago Cubs? That's going to be interesting, as well as the rotation. Remember, Shota Imanaga, that was one of their big signings this offseason. And, coming from Japan, he was in a 6-man rotation there. How is he going to balance this rotation? Is it going to be Javier Assad getting some starts there? Or could they bring in someone on the free agent market? They've been connected with Jordan Montgomery. Remember, go back to the Cody Bellinger press conference. There was a report from Jesse Rogers, or not really a report, but something he had heard with Craig Counsell when he was speaking with Scott Boras. He jokingly said, well, where's Montgomery? Why isn't he here with Bellinger? So it looked like it was a tongue-in-cheek, joking kind of a comment, but that could be interesting, something to pay attention to. So very interested to see how he manages this pitching staff, as well as, who gets more of the playing time in certain spots. So I think most of the eyes, they're going to be on Craig Counsell and how he's doing things in spring training for the Cubs. And just like the Chicago Cubs with the Diamondbacks, I'm going to be paying attention to the whole team. Why? Because they have more expectations, just getting to a World Series this past year, and they had themselves a pretty good offseason, starting with the lineup, adding in guys like Jock Peterson, Eugenio Suarez. You brought back Lourdes Gurriel Jr. for the rotation, bringing in Eduardo Rodriguez. I like some of these moves that they've made. And then you're going to have some younger guys taking step forwards this coming year, like Brandon Pfaadt stepped up in the postseason last year at times. Gabriel Moreno, another year under his belt. And of course, Corbin Carroll, can he take even a step forward this coming year? So for the Diamondbacks, I'm just going to be looking at how everyone is going to be performing, because this Diamondbacks team, there's a lot of talent here. Could they take that next step as a team? It starts in spring training. Let's talk the LA Dodgers. A phenomenal offseason, bringing in guys like Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, James Paxton, Teoscar Hernandez, bringing back guys for the bullpen like Joe Kelly, Ryan Brazier. I mean, the list goes on and on. What an offseason for the Dodgers. But one guy that I'm going to be paying attention to with the Dodgers, most people, I feel like they're going to be looking at Shohei Ohtani. I mean, they were all over his first batting practice with the Dodgers. I mean, how could you not pay attention to him? As well as Yamamoto. Sure, yeah, I'm paying attention to Yamamoto too. He's fun to watch. He looked nasty against the Rangers the first time he pitched. But the guy that I'm focused on is Walker Buehler. Had Tommy John surgery, missed all of last year, and so far this spring, he's only thrown to live hitters at camp. So I'm definitely looking to see how he progresses, because if he is healthy and good to go, my goodness, this rotation is looking absolutely nasty, especially if Glasnow stays healthy as well. Yamamoto, Buehler, and Glasnow at the top of their game, as well as Bobby Miller. I mean, good grief. That is a lot of beef in that rotation. But, just like Buehler, I'm paying attention to his health this spring. I'm going to be paying attention to that with Glasnow as well. Yamamoto, yeah, that's fun, but I'm looking at the other guys behind Yamamoto. So let's see how that goes for the Dodgers. And speaking of good off seasons, how about the San Francisco Giants just signing Max Chapman last night? I mean, my goodness, the Giants, they attacked this offseason from so many different angles. I mean, you've added some speed and contact at the top of the lineup with Jung-Hoo Lee. You've added Jorge Soler, an impact bat with power for the middle of the order, a defensive glove in Max Chapman for the rotation, bringing in Jordan Hicks, who, was a reliever, but now he's looked at as a starter. And don't forget, they traded for Robbie Ray. So, maybe there could be another move. Could Blake Snell be an addition for the Giants? We'll see here. But what I'm going to be paying attention to with the Giants, now that you've brought in Max Chapman, is how are they going to balance all of this, right? Now that Chapman's going to be your third baseman, what's going to be happening with guys like Wilmer Flores, J.D. Davis, Tyra Estrada, Lamont Wake Jr., there's a lot of at-bats to go around here. I'm very intrigued to see how the Giants balance this out. And let's see, I think this spring, you're going to find out a lot of those answers. Moving on to the Cleveland Guardians, no more Terry Francona, an absolute legend in the game, retiring after last season. They have a new manager now in Stephen Vogt. But with the Guardians, I'm paying attention to all of the youth that they have. They got a lot of good young guys on this team to pay attention to. I'm looking at Kyle Manzardo, the best mustache in the game. Let's see what he can do this spring. I'm very excited about him. A good bat that they acquired last year in the trade with the Rays, with Aaron Savali there. So paying attention to him, along with these guys in the rotation, like Gavin Williams, like Bybee going into another year, Logan Allen as well. Tristan McKenzie had some ups and downs last year. So very excited about all of these young guys that are that are coming up with the Guardians. I think they could be a fun team this year, bit of an under the radar team. So definitely intrigued to see what they do during spring training. Moving on to the Seattle Mariners, and we have yet another guest to give us their thoughts on what they think the top storyline for this spring training is. Let's go talk to the guys over at Mariner Mojo and see what they think.
Hey, I'm Colton.
And I'm Joe, and we are Mariner Mojo.
Now, Mariners first baseman Ty France had a rough year in 2023, including a sap of his power and a little bit of injury history as well with Ty France. In 2023's offseason, he went to Driveline.
And JP Crawford in the 2022 offseason also went to Driveline, and we all know how good JP Crawford was in 2023. Us Mariners fans are hoping that Ty France has a similar bounce back this upcoming year.
And France is a big part of this roster because he lengthens the lineup 1 through 9, and you can put him over at first base and really have some confidence in his defense. They may also want to move him to third base at some point during 2024. We expect Ty France to have a big season.
Thank you to Robbie for having us, and go Mariners.
And thanks to the guys over at Mariner Mojo. They do some great Mariners content on the daily, so make sure you go follow their channel. But I agree here. Ty France, he was very good in 2021 and 2022, but had a down season last year, had a good offseason like they mentioned. So let's see if he can get back to some of those numbers, and a good spring training for him is only going to help that. But I think the new additions of Mitch Garver, bringing back Mitch Haniger, that's going to add a lot of extension to this lineup, hopefully take a bit of pressure off of Ty France. And to be honest with you, I'm not just looking at Ty France. I'm going to be looking at this entire lineup for this spring training, but definitely Ty France. He's a big bounce back candidate for them this year. And if the Mariners of this offense, with these new pieces in the lineup, if they could all put it together, this could be an excellent lineup this year. Moving on to the Miami Marlins, and what I'm going to be paying attention to with the Marlins this spring is the starting pitching. Remember, no Sandy Alcantara this season. He got Tommy John surgery, so he's going to be out for the whole year. But I think they still have a pretty good rotation. You got Jesus Luzardo, Uri Perez, you got Garrett, Cabrera, Rogers, and I'm paying attention to Rogers as well, especially with the health. He missed a lot of time last season. Edward Cabrera, he's been up and down with the health, so let's see what those guys can do. Uri Perez, can he take a step forward? Remember, he's one of the top pitching prospects in the game, and he was pretty good last year. Jesus Luzardo, he was phenomenal last year. Can he do even better? He's another year removed from kind of, coming off the rails when he was with the Oakland A's before getting traded to Miami and getting himself back on track. Don't forget about AJ Puck. They're looking at him as maybe a starting pitcher, so let's see if he can get into the rotation. Don't forget about a guy like Max Meyer. He got Tommy John surgery, so this is one of the top pitching prospects in the game. So let's see, maybe we can get some progress out of him this spring. So we will see, but the Marlins, pitching is the game with them, and I still think it looks pretty good. So looking to see what kind of starts they have this spring. Moving on to the New York Mets, and we have another guest to chime in, and that's Wardy NYM to give his thoughts on what he thinks the top storyline for this spring is. Wardy, what are you thinking?
How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and today I'm going to tell you why the Mets' biggest storyline this spring is undoubtedly their rotation, which is anything but a certainty heading into the regular season. After losing their ace Kodai Senga for at minimum a month or two to begin the regular season, now losing to a lesser degree Max Kranick, a guy who was competing for the fifth rotation spot, the Metropolitans now have a rotation that consists of guys like Jose Quintana, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, Adrian Hauser, Tyler McGill, and then you have Jose Buto, Joey Lucchesi also competing in those spots. And while David Stern still may add to this rotation before the season begins, as things currently stand, it is a big wild card what you're going to get from these starters, and that is without question why it is the biggest storyline.
And special thanks to Wardy for those thoughts. Everyone, make sure you go follow his channel. He gives amazing daily content for the Mets, one of the best Mets minds out there. But I have to agree here, this starting rotation is definitely a question mark, especially with no Kodai Senga. Now, Luis Severino, this is a guy I've always liked, but, he's had a lot of health issues. And if he could get it together, have himself a good spring, that could translate into a good regular season. So let's see what he does this spring. Jose Quintana missed time last year, so let's see what he's looking like. Sean Manaea, Sean Manaea at this point, I think if you can just get some decent innings out of him, I think that's a win. And then bringing in a solid guy like Adrian Hauser, let's see what he looks like this spring. And then you got McGill at the back end. You got some other guys competing there as well. Guys like Jose Buto. You got Lucchesi there too. So let's see how the rotation shapes up until Senga comes back. Definitely a bummer that he's going to be out, but definitely intrigued to see what this rotation is looking like during this spring training. Moving on to the Washington Nationals, and two guys that I'm paying attention to with the Nationals are their two top prospects, Dylan Cruz and James Wood. If we take a look at the top 100 as of right now, Dylan Cruz is number 7 overall, while James Wood is number 14 overall. Dylan Cruz, he just got drafted number 2 overall last year and was already making some noise in the minors last year at A-ball through 14 games. They called him up to Double-A for 20 games. So I would imagine he's probably going to be starting in Double-A. Who knows, maybe even Triple-A. I could see Dylan Cruz absolutely getting a taste of the major leagues this year. He is that good, was phenomenal at LSU. And James Wood, he had himself a really good season last year in the minor leagues, through high A and double A, had a 492 slugging, 18 homers, along with 10 stolen bases in double A last year. So these are the two guys that I think Nationals fans should pay attention to for this coming season. And hey, the Nationals, they won 71 games last year. You know, not really a whole lot, but for a team that really, you know, is in rebuild mode, you know, that's not the worst number overall. And maybe they could take a bit of a step forward this year, and maybe some of this youth can give them a bit of a boost. And speaking of top prospects, I think the number one storyline out of Orioles camp this spring is the number one prospect in baseball, Jackson Holliday. Number one overall on MLB Pipeline's top 100. This kid does it all. He hits for power, plays the field well. He's got a lot of speed. There is a lot to like about Jackson Holliday, the number one pick from the 2022 draft. And last year, he made a lot of noise in the minor leagues. He started off at A-ball, went all the way to AAA by the end of the year. And as of right now, Fangraphs, they are projecting him to be the second baseman for the Orioles on opening day after they break camp. Very exciting player. I mean, taking a look at the numbers last year, he spent the majority in high A and double A, but these numbers are phenomenal. A 507 slugging in double A last year. I mean, goodness gracious, a 452 on base in high A, a 396 on base in triple A. This kid is special. He is definitely the big story for the Orioles this spring. And for the Padres, we have another guest to share their thoughts. We have Borna of Hogwatch. Borna, what are you thinking for the Padres this spring?
The top storyline for the Padres this year and in spring training is their starting pitching. We all know that the top three of their rotation is going to be Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish, and Michael King. But what after? There's no depth. They don't have any left-handed starting pitchers. Is it going to be internal, or is AJ Preller still going to make a move in March? At the time of recording this video, it is March 1st. And a lot of teams don't have their rosters filled out. Here's what I do know. One of those three guys goes down, the Padres are absolutely screwed from their starting pitching rotation.
And once again, I have to agree, the starting pitching is the key for the Padres this year. They still have a lot of talent in this lineup despite no more Juan Soto. You still got guys like Fernando Tatis Jr., Xander Bogaerts, Manny Machado. Let's see if Jake Cronenworth can bounce back. Ha-Seong Kim, one of the more underrated players in the game, in my opinion. The lineup still has plenty of bats, but this spring, this rotation, they need to get off on the right foot. Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish absolutely need to be healthy this year. And then one of the pieces coming back for Juan Soto, Michael King, I think he's a big key for the Padres. So hopefully for the Padres, they get, a nice clean spring training out of these pitchers, and that can set them up for success for this coming year. For the Philadelphia Phillies, I think the top story this spring has to be center fielder Johan Rojas. Dave Dombrowski has yet to anoint him the center fielder. Says that there's still some things that he needs to work on. He needs to improve his pitch recognition, his swing decisions as well. So he's not going to be really the best hitter in his career, but he definitely needs to do more. So definitely pay attention to what he's doing with the bat this spring. For the Pittsburgh Pirates, this one is obvious. Their top story this spring is their top prospect, Paul Skeens, the number 3 prospect in all of Major League Baseball as of right now. The hype is very similar to when Steven Strasburg came up in 2010. This guy is the real deal. He was absolutely dominant for LSU, helped carry them to a College World Series championship, and the grades are through the roof. He throws around 100 consistently, has an 80 on the fastball, a nasty slider, a up to complement that as well, throws a ton of strikes. Paul Skeens is going to be something very, very special. And for the Pittsburgh Pirates, they do have a lot of youth coming up here, but Paul Skeens, all eyes are going to be on him this spring, and I absolutely think you could see him be pitching in Major League Baseball very soon this year. And speaking of more top prospects, let's talk about the defending World Series champion Texas Rangers. And no, I'm not thinking about, what they're going to do to defend their championship. I'm looking at a top prospect that actually I think could help them defend their championship, and that is Wyatt Langford. As of right now, the number 6 overall prospect in Major League Baseball. I think there's an argument that he should be even higher than this. Did you see what this guy did in the minor leagues last year after entering professional baseball for the first time coming out of college? Are you kidding me? 44 games last year between rookie ball, high A, double A, and triple A, 5 games at triple A. This guy was mashing at all levels last year, had an OPS of 1.157, hit 360, had 10 home runs. Are you kidding me? This guy was off the charts last year. And right now, Fangraphs, they are projecting him for a pretty good season in his rookie year. 112 games, a 1.8 Fangraph WAR with the 19 homers, a 338 on base, and a 474 slugging. And as of right now, he is projected to be the opening day designated hitter. I absolutely think if Wyatt Langford has himself a good spring, he should absolutely make this team on opening day. For the Tampa Bay Rays, I think the story to pay attention to them for this spring is all of the youth they have coming up. They got a couple of prospects that I think are very close to being ready. Junior Caminero, the number 4 prospect in baseball right now, had a cup of coffee last year for the Rays. Don't forget about Curtis Mead as well. These are 2 bats that can absolutely help them this coming year. So let's see what kind of springs they can have, especially Junior Caminero. This is a guy that absolutely should be able to help the Rays this year, which could be huge for them considering we have no idea what's going to happen with Wander Franco. And then don't forget about Ryan Pepio. They got him back in the Tyler Glasnow trade. So far, he's had a couple of starts this spring, looking pretty decent overall. Ryan Pepio, definitely a solid arm to pay attention to for the Rays. And this is what the Rays do. They just have all of these young guys. They come up and contribute. So let's pay attention to that yet again this coming spring. And for my Boston Red Sox, believe it or not, I actually have a guest to give their thoughts on what they think the top storyline for them this spring is. Let's go to Red Seat Radio. Let's see what he thinks.
The top storyline for the Red Sox this spring is most definitely their rotation. Can the new pitching trust of Bailey, Breslow, and Willard get either these players in the rotation back to what they were, or to finally take a step forward that we've been waiting for them to take? There's also a competition going on right now for that 5th spot. Who's going to win that one out? Is it going to be Tanner Houck, Garrett Whitlock, or Josh Winkowski? Plus, the Red Sox need to figure out who their number 1 starter is still. There are a lot of questions right now in this rotation. It's going to be super interesting to watch and see how it unfolds. Thanks for having me on, Robbie.
And special thanks to Red Seat Radio. Everyone, make sure you go follow his channel. But I could not agree more. The starting rotation is absolutely the focus of this spring training with a new pitching coach in Andrew Bailey. Had a lot of success with the San Francisco Giants. Let's see if he can bring that over to Boston. Sure, you did bring in Lucas Giolito, but even if you get him back to his old self, he's more like a 3 in the rotation of anything. I am excited about Brian Bayo. Definitely a lot of potential there, but how much of a step forward can he take this year? Sure, Nick Pivetta, Cutter Crawford, they had some good moments last year, but let's see what they can do this coming year. And then you got a battle for the 5th spot. Tanner Houck, I think, is going to be the guy that ends up winning that spot with Winkowski and Whitlock heading to the bullpen. But the number 1 question, will the Red Sox be able to land the perfect fit in Jordan Montgomery? Will they spend the cash? I don't know. But if they can get Montgomery, that would provide some valuable innings for this rotation that they desperately need. So I think that in itself is a very big storyline for this spring. For the Cincinnati Reds, I think the big story this spring is just seeing how their whole roster ends up doing. There's a lot of different things to pay attention to with the Reds. Who's going to be getting most of the playing time at different infield spots like third base? You're going to be having more of Jeimer Candelario, Noelvi Marte there. Where does Christian Encarnacion Strand play most of the time? So very intrigued to see how the Reds end up going with things, and I think you're going to get a taste of that this spring, seeing where they play, what positions they play. And for the rotation, I'm looking to see, Frankie Montas didn't pitch last year. Let's see what he ends up doing this spring. Let's see what happens with Nick Lodolo. We haven't seen him for a long time. Hunter Green. Let's see, he's a guy that's been having some injuries over the last couple of years. Let's see how he does this spring. So there's a lot to pay attention to with the Cincinnati Reds. And most of all, Elly De La Cruz. He came up last year. He was electric, but then he really cooled off after that. So looking to see what he does with the bat this spring. But the Reds, I think they could be a very fun team this year. And of course, literally as I'm recording that segment, Elly De La Cruz hit an absolute bomb at spring training, went an estimated 470 feet. He's looking pretty good. For the Colorado Rockies, I'm going to be looking to see how Chris Bryant does this spring. It's been a bad contract so far. He's missed a lot of time during the first 2 years of this contract. So looking to see how healthy he's looking for 2024. Like I said, he has not performed well and missing a lot of time. But even when he's been on the field, he has just been very subpar. Last year, a negative 1.2 Fangraph WAR. Definitely paying attention to what Chris Bryant does in this spring training. For the Kansas City Royals, I'm going going to be paying attention to the entire team this spring. I mean, they basically have a new team. Take a look at all the additions they've made. They added Hunter Renfroe for the lineup. You've added a couple of pictures in Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo. You've added some bullpen pieces in Will Smith, John Schreiber, Chris Stratton, Matt Sawyer. A ton of additions for the Kansas City Royals. Don't forget, you're getting Vinny Pasquantino back. Hopefully he's healthy. I think that's someone to pay attention to. Bobby Wick Jr. got himself a fat new contract. So I'm paying attention to a lot of aspects of the Kansas City Royals. This is going to be a fun division this year, in my opinion. It's very wide open. And speaking of improved teams in the AL Central, how about the Detroit Tigers? They had a busy offseason, adding a bunch of veteran guys like Mark Canha and Gio Urshela for the lineup. You added Jack Flaherty and Kenta Maeda for the rotation. You brought in Andrew Chafin, Shelby Miller for the bullpen. I think the Tigers had themselves quite a productive offseason, and they're looking like a pretty solid team coming into this year. But the one guy I got my eyes on this spring is Colt Keith. They just gave him an extension before even playing one game of Major League Baseball, but I think it's going to be worth it. As of right now, he's the number 22 prospect in Major League Baseball and had a very good season in the minor leagues last year between AA and AAA. Overall, he hit 306 with a 380 on base, a 552 slugging, which was a 932 OPS overall, 27 homers, 101 RBIs. I mean, listen, Colt Keith, I remember this guy coming out of the draft back in 2020. I saw this guy as a sleeper, and here he is, number 22 overall, and I definitely think he can make some noise for the Tigers this coming year. Don't forget about some of the other young guys they have. Number 1 pick Spencer Torkelson, he came out of that same draft. You got Riley Green. Let's see if he's healthy. I really like this Tigers team this year, but I'm going to be paying attention to Colt Keith this spring. For the Minnesota Twins, I'm going to be paying attention to the starting rotation this spring. No more Sonny Gray. He was fantastic for them last season, but he went to the Cardinals, so now the Twins are going to have to figure out how to move on without him. You still got Pablo Lopez. He's awesome. Joe Ryan, he's solid in my opinion. Bailey Ober, let's see if you can get a little bit more out of him this coming season. But looking at the back end, I'm looking at Chris Paddock and Anthony Desclafani. I think those two guys are very important to keep an eye out for this spring. Let's see how they do, especially Chris Paddock. This is a guy that's dealt with numerous injuries in the past, so let's see if he's back on track. But I think the starting pitching for the Twins, definitely something to keep an eye on for this spring. For the Chicago White Sox this spring, I'm going to be asking one question, and that's, is Dylan Cease going to be with this team by the end of spring training? He's been in trade rumors all off season, and teams, they're still looking for starting pitching out there. There was even a report not too long ago that the Yankees prefer Dylan Cease to Blake Snell, so could they come together this spring, maybe work something out? I mean, I don't even know what this White Sox team is. You got some talent here. Luis Robert Jr. finally had himself a really good season last year. You know, Yohan Moncada, what can he do this coming year? Andrew Benintendi, he was kind of a dud. And in the first year of that contract, Andrew Vaughn, can he finally take that big step forward that we're all waiting for? You know, Eloy Jimenez, you know, I don't know. I just don't know what this White Sox team is. You got some decent names in the lineup, but I feel like you're going to need to get a lot out of this rotation and the bullpen as well. I just don't know, again, what this White Sox team is. So I'm still waiting to see if they're going to hang on to Dylan Cease or not. And let's see if he's still with this team by the end of spring. And last but not least, let's talk about the Yankees this spring. There's a lot of expectations for the Yankees this year, so there's a lot of eyeballs on players during spring training for them this year, including newcomer Juan Soto, off to a hot start this spring, hitting a few bombs already. But one guy that I got my eyes on in spring training for them this year is Carlos Rodon. He had a terrible first year in the first year of that 6-year, $162 million contract. I mean, my goodness, an absolute dud. Once again, falling to the injury bug. 14 starts overall, ERA at a 6.85, FIP at a 5.79. So Yankee fans are definitely expecting a lot more out of Carlos Rodon this coming year, but he looks healthier this spring. He looks like he's in better shape this spring. So I think everyone's going to be glued to all of his starts this spring training, and gonna see if that's gonna translate to some good results this coming year. And this is a big year for the Yankees. So let me know what you think down below in the comments. What are your storylines that you are paying attention to for this spring training? Let me know. But once again, thank you to all the content creators that gave their storylines that they're paying attention to for this spring training. Huge thanks to all those guys for coming on. But everyone, that's all I have for right now. If you can on the way out, hit that like button for me, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.